Investigators probing the crash of a China Eastern jet are looking at whether someone in the cockpit intentionally crashed the plane. The Boeing 737-800 crashed 2 months ago into the mountains after a sudden plunge from cruising altitude. It killed more than 120 passengers and 9 crew on board. Let's get some analysis now from Captain Byron Bailey, an aviation expert. Byron, what do you make of this news today that reports suggesting that someone in the cockpit had intentionally brought the plane down?
Yeah, well, the NTSB, that's the National Transport Safety Bureau, had got the 2 black boxes and sent it off, did the analysis and sent it off to the Chinese government, who are holding back the information. But someone leaked to the Wall Street Journal actually what was contained on the flight data recorder, which is the one that records everything that's happening to the airplane, the position of the control column, where the flaps are, where the thrust levers are, if it's banking, what the speed is and everything else. And this plane was in cruise. It suddenly entered a steep dive, leveled off for about 20 seconds, and then resumed the steep dive and crashed. The time from cruise altitude to impact was around 2 minutes. What the flight data recorder shows is that somebody was pushing the control column forward. And that means an intentional, and we think it was the co-pilot. And here comes the reason, and I found this out from a Chinese source, an expat actually that used to fly for a Chinese airline, reckoned that the co-pilot was actually previously a high-time captain who had been busted back to co-pilot, which meant that his salary dropped to a quarter of what he had before. And of course, there's the loss of face and the shame. So it looks like this particular dude decided to take revenge on China Eastern. It's very sad indeed.
Terrible. And we should remember as well, it's the deadliest crash aviation accident, I think, in 3 decades in China.
Yeah, that's right. But, pilot suicide is not that uncommon. I mean, there's 6 I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, there was the Silk Air Singapore pilot who owed $2 million and was due to pay it back, and decided when his co-pilot was out of the cockpit to crash it into a swamp in Indonesia. We had the Egypt Air 23 years ago, 747 out of New York. The co-pilot, Al Battuti, decided to crash the aeroplane. The flight data recorder, which was retrieved, showed that the control column was held full forward, and the cockpit voice recorder had him saying Allahu Akbar all the way down. But the Egyptian government said, no, it was a control problem, and and he was just praying. There's a bunch of others, like the German Wings one into the Alps, but that 27-year-old pilot was just absolutely insane. He shouldn't have been flying.
Yeah, so there are these examples, and on each of those that you cite, it's how rare is it when you look at the incidence of accidents of this magnitude? Is it mechanical versus human interference in these events?
Human interference, yeah. 95% of all accidents have some pilot input. Whether they mishandle an abnormal situation and make it worse. But in these cases where the suicide murder, like MH370, for example, he didn't crash the aeroplane. He decided to ditch it in the southern Indian Ocean to avoid a massive floating pile of debris to hide the aeroplane. But they all have motives, and perhaps should look more closely at the mental attitude of some of the pilots.
Captain Byron Bailey, aviation expert, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Kieran.